Hi, I'm Adam Marcus, the director of Jason Goes to Hell. Just wanted to thank you for buying probably your fourth version of this movie that you own. Thanks.
I don't like this movie. I don't understand this movie, but I appreciate it for being one of the biggest talking points of the series. This is the one I like to hear people reacting to for their first viewing. Imagine sitting someone down to marathon all of these movies, and then they get to Jason Goes to Hell. It's almost like a big practical joke, especially when you consider that it came out 4 years after Jason Takes Manhattan. If you don't know, this movie involves body swapping. As we learned from bounty hunter Creighton Duke, Jason wears bodies like folks wear suits. If the body he's wearing gets weak, his true form, a big giant snake thing, will just cross over into another body. So, does that explain why Jason can never really die? I know everyone loves to shit on this film, and for good reason, but when I was a kid and I saw this for the first time, I thought it was an interesting way to explain why he keeps coming back after dying at the end of every movie. Of course, I know the real reason why he kept coming back. That knowledge only comes with getting old and becoming a cynical adult. Hey, money talks, and the filmmakers were laughing all the way to the bank in the 80s. This is the first one I saw in theaters. Yes, I was young, and it was probably a dollar theater, but I distinctly remember my dad taking me. My older cousins had seen the movie and described what it was all about, which made me want to see it even more. I just couldn't believe what kind of movie it was. This is the only one in the series that doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th film. It feels like a bizarro fan film that a 10-year-old writes just to see his favorite character doing some outlandish things that he'd never get to see in the movies. And then Jason Goes to Hell came along. In all honesty, while I don't really like this movie, I do think somehow there is a fun movie to be made that uses this concept. Of course, everything in this film goes against the mythology, which isn't much of a mythology, really. Jason was a boy who drowned in Crystal Lake, and his mourning mother went on a killing spree. That was the original film. That all changed, starting with Part 2, but that was essentially Jason's backstory, and it stayed that way pretty much until this movie came out. I'm not a stickler for continuity. Again, what makes this series so fun is just seeing how it evolved. I remember seeing Jason Takes Manhattan on cable in late 89, early 90, and thinking just how vastly different it was compared to the original movie. Boy, I didn't know what was in store for me in the next few years. But one piece of lore that always bothered me was the fact that in Jason Goes to Hell, you realize that Jason had a sister. They do the Star Wars thing where you find that Jason is part of this bigger family squabble, and the Voorhees name is this evil thing that Jason needs to be reborn, and I really don't care. It's not interesting. But what bothers me is that in the first film, Mrs. Voorhees flatly states that Jason was her only child.
My only child. Jason.
That's it. She literally says it.
Jason had a sister.
So how could they give him a sister and make it believable? They don't. And I've heard director Adam Marcus's behind-the-scenes explanation of this, that Mrs. Voorhees had her daughter out of wedlock and gave her up for adoption, and that Jason was the apple of her eye. That sounds so much like a piece of fan fiction, and it never gets brought up in the movie. So I don't care about your explanation. If you couldn't work it into the film, it doesn't count. You messed up the mythology so badly by giving him a sister, or any surviving relatives, really. Can you picture the Jason from New Blood with a granddaughter? It doesn't make any sense. The other thing I really can't stand about this movie is that there seems to be a lot of in-jokes between Adam Marcus and his buddies. I guess at one point there were certain lines that were written strictly because the director wanted to make his actor friends laugh. That bothers me. I don't care about what your friends think about the film. I'm a paying audience member. Entertain me. Do I really need to hear a doctor talking about how he wants to take a crap on Jason's mask?
A big old mango-sized crap.
Have some respect for the dead, you righteous prick. Then there's the scene where the cop is lying naked on a table, getting shaved by Black Jason. I'm all good with Jason being black, diversity and all, but when Adam Marcus discusses this scene, he says he put it in the movie because he knew 10 years down the road, people would be asking about the scene. Again, it's there for shock value, to get a reaction from the audience. And it's off-putting, it's weird, it has nothing to do with anything, and it's completely unrelated to anything we see in either this film or any other film in the franchise. The effects are great. There are some standout scenes, but the movie is really all over the place. I kind of like when the main character, Stephen Freeman, visits the Voorhees house, and you find out that they misspelled Jason's last name. Adam Marcus hates when people point that out, but look, You say you're a big fan of this franchise, and I believe you. As crazy as your choices were for this movie, I'm sure you're a fan. But the fact that you misspelled the main villain's last name on something as prominent as a sign in front of a house shows a real lack of care. And I'm sure it was just a flub, but that would be like someone misspelling Kruger or Myers. Funny, Jason's surname isn't used as often as those other two guys, but come on. The real fans know you messed up, and we deserved better. I kind of like the idea that we only get Jason bookending the film. That was an intentional choice, to give us Jason as a reward for watching the full movie. I'm on the fence about Jason's appearance, but it's pretty cool, and yet different. He's still recognizable, just with a radically different design. In this one, they made it look like his skin is just growing into the mask, which is why his head looks so gnarly. And they went back to that mountain man, scraggly tufts of hair look from part 2, which I appreciate. And the scene where the FBI blows Jason to smithereens is a great turning point for the film because you just have no idea where it's going to go. The other thing that kind of bugs me about this film are the characters. To be honest, Jason Goes to Hell does have some of the more colorful cast, like Joey B., who reminds me of Ethel Hubbard from Part 5.
You really want me to cut these like this?
Yes, I do.
They look stupid.
Well, it's your own dumbass fault. They're supposed to look like hockey masks.
I like the dynamic between Joey, her son Ward, and her husband Shelby.
Honey, watch the willy.
And I also really like Creighton Duke. Yeah, he's a creep to Jason's sister Diana, and he steals lines straight out of Jaws.
And for that, you get the mask, the machete, the whole damn thing.
But I've actually always liked his interaction with Steven in the jail cell. Creighton Duke is nuts, and he belongs in a completely different franchise, but he was one of the few takeaways from this movie. But most of the cast is quite a bit older than we're used to, and I'm sorry, but Steven is just a wet blanket. I just can't get into his character. I like the scene where he fights Jason in the end and he just gets his nerdy ass handed to him, but he's also an absent father, so they make him unlikable from the word go. And most of the supporting characters are pretty bland too. I appreciate this movie because, as Adam Marcus has stated so many times, there are 8 other Jason movies where Jason's just doing his thing, so I can't be mad at him for totally going against the grain at a time when a lot of the 80s horror icons were becoming irrelevant. But I think there could have been a smarter way of doing it. As it stands, it's not a good movie, it could have been better, but I love the conversations around this movie. It's polarizing for sure. And it's not worth arguing about. Even people who like this movie for what it is probably understand the mixed feelings. I'm not defending it, but I mean, come on. From the opening scene, I think you know you're in for a crazy, batshit kind of movie. And since it's really the only one of its kind out of 12 movies, hey, can you really be that mad?